Students need to see examples of nonviolent change and conflict resolution. They need to see that they can become peacemakers. These are the words of Barbara Stanford, a peace educator, who wrote in the 1980s about why peace education is so important for schools to pursue. In my presentation, I want you to understand that we can become peacemakers, people in this room. And I want you to understand why peace studies can be such an important academic field at Stanford, like it is at so many other schools across the country. To go along with this, I have three specific claims that I'll be making. The first, that peace studies is an academic field. It is definable. It has a definition. The second, that there are two main barriers to a peace program at Stanford. One, internal disagreement within the Peace Studies Task Force. Secondly, administrative apathy, trying to convince an administration that peace studies is definable and worthy of study. So I'll start with going through why peace studies is an academic field. Peace studies is an academic field in large part because it has a definition like engineering, like biology, like any other field. That is, the analysis and prevention, de-escalation and solution of conflicts by peaceful or nonviolent means, thereby seeking victory for all parties involved in the conflict. These are the words of Charles Vabel, another peace scholar I spoke to this quarter and over the summer, and someone who is respected in this field. Let me reference one more quote as to why peace studies is an academic field. And this is said by Michael Nagler, the man in the purple shirt down here. He came to Stanford just a couple months ago. And in talking with him, he said, peace is a science, and it was constantly described as such by Gandhi. Peace is a science, not just a field, it's a science. So why is peace a science? Well, peace scholarship. Namely, we have peace and justice studies associations, like the PGSA. We also have scholarship closer to home. Ain't Gonna Study War No More on Peace Studies was actually created, the peace pamphlet, that was created at Stanford in the 1980s by students and faculty working together, collaborative classroom environment. Thirdly, we have peace journals, like Peace Review, a journal of social justice. And these are perhaps the most academic of these examples I've listed here. And coincidentally, Peace Review, which now has global readership, was also created at Stanford in the late 1980s. Third thing I'll say is that there are peace programs across the country. We can look to, if you look at this map, there are peace programs across the country represented by each blue point. Some of them are in California. UC Berkeley has a peace studies major. Others are in New York. Others are in the South. Others are in North Dakota even. There are peace studies minors, majors, even a PhD program in peace at Notre Dame, crisscrossing the country, overseas as well. So having gone through my first point, I want to move to my second claim. Having gone through why peace studies is so academic, I want us to understand, so if it is academic, if it is definable, what are the main barriers to a peace program at Stanford? And these are twofold. One, internal disagreement. We have to have a unified task force for peace of students, of faculty, and of administrators. Secondly, administrative apathy. We have to convince the administration that this is a necessary field at Stanford, like engineering or any other field. The Peace Studies course debuted at Stanford in 1984. It was created by the Peace Studies Task Force I've referenced. But its offerings were very diffuse. I'll give you just one example. On one day, the Peace course tried to study pacifism and Gandhi in just one day, one lecture. The next time they came back and tried to study the history of war. History of war, wow. The next one, they came back, and even broader, conflict resolution, not just war, conflict resolution. We have to have a peace course that's unified, not diffuse. I talked to Byron Bland, teacher of the Peace Studies course for over 25 years at Stanford, and he said, I don't think the first peace course had a good sense of what it was focusing on. The leader of the Peace Studies Task Force, but they didn't know. The other divide in the Peace Studies Task Force in the 1980s was between Judy Adams, a student at Stanford, and the faculty in the task force. Judy Adams actually created a proposal in 1985 to President Donald Kennedy, president of Stanford, to create a peace studies major at Stanford. Her audacity was met with very little emotion or enthusiasm by the task force. Faculty dismissed Adams' proposal on the basis that they would have to improve the Peace Studies course. They had to keep working on the Peace Studies course. Now this leads me into my next point, which is that administrative apathy was a major roadblock on the road to peace, incidentally. Provost Al Hasdorf, above the Stanford logo, when asked by the Peace Studies Task Force, what should peace studies look like at Stanford, replied that faculty should get together and talk about peace. He didn't do much more than that. It was very passive guidance, and actually, a few years later, this guidance took a left turn. And in 1985, the administration, Provost Al Hasdorf and another dean at Stanford, actually cut funding for the task force. Funding was gone, evaporated. So now, not only could the task force not propose a program in peace, a minor or major, it also didn't have funding for the peace course in general. I want to segue from the 1980s to a time of great success, but also great failure, and move to the 1990s and 2000s. From 1999 through 2007, Byron Bland taught a peace studies course that had an intellectual framework. He defined peace in relationship to enemy relationships. In other words, enemy relationships were the framework we should focus on for peace studies. But when I talked to him, he said in 2007 he could no longer teach the course. And the reason was, it was simply because I couldn't get support from the departments to hire the TAs to do it. So now, it's not only the administration that we have to face, it's also departments. Departments have to understand that peace studies is something truly academic and truly inspirational for students at Stanford. And that's something that Byron Bland was never able to do. So I want to move on and sort of refocus on what we can do from here on out. What can we do since 2007, since the peace studies course ended? And I want us to look back and think, well, now we know peace studies is academic. We know that there's this history, this failed history in many respects. How can we improve upon that effort to institutionalize peace and justice in the form of a minor or a major? Okay? Because these barriers can be overcome. These barriers can be overcome. It's worth repeating. What are the requirements for a peace program? They are threefold. Students, faculty, and the administration must work together, must collaborate in a learning environment similar to Austin's presentation, in a healthy environment that focuses on how we can overcome the internal division that plagued the task force and the administrative apathy which also plagued the task force. Okay. So, faculty can look to a case study. At American University in the 1980s, the same time frame, faculty got together and instead of dividing each other with claims that peace studies should focus on this, on war, on psychology, they unified. And over a 10-year period, for 10 years, they spent time thinking, how should we frame peace studies? Now, at American University, thanks to the efforts of faculty who unified, there is an international conflict resolution peace center, widely recognized as one of the best in the country. The administration is another critical part of this equation for peace. Administration at Stanford must recognize that there is first a gap in peace studies. Secondly, that the administration must support this peace studies task force, which now works. And thirdly, that the administration must support peace studies because of its innovative framework, its innovative nature. Peace studies is something that tends to go beyond the boundaries of traditional political science by looking at how we can resolve conflicts peacefully, back to that definition I referenced. The third part is the most important, and that is students must mobilize for peace studies. We must look back on this history of the Peace Studies Task Force, of Judy Adams, and think not that they were peaceniks, that they had this grand vision that was really not based in reality, but rather that they mobilized for their education. They mobilized because they saw Stanford as not supporting what they wanted to learn at Stanford in college. Instead, they actually pushed the task force to become more radical and to try and create a peace program. So, in summary, there are three claims on the road to peace that I'm making. One, that it is an academic field, and I think that you all agree that peace scholarship, the peace programs, and its definition make that pretty easy. The second, more difficult claim, that internal disagreement and administrative apathy are the two main barriers that we must overcome. And the third, that these barriers can be overcome, the most optimistic point, but also a point worth repeating, because we need the inspiration of people like Judy Adams, of people like Barbara Stanford, who said, students need to see examples of nonviolent change and conflict resolution. They need to see that they can become peacemakers. Thank you.